Hello and welcome to today's Marketing Sherpa webinar. We are going to be talking about email marketing and the content in your email marketing. We thank you for taking an hour out of your day, the busy marketer schedule, to be with us today. We know how valuable that is, so now it is our challenge. It is on me and Courtney to deliver as much value or more back to you. And let me tell you how we're going to do that. If you're not familiar with Marketing Sherpa webinars, give me just a moment to tell you a little bit about what we do. First of all, where everything comes from. I've got Courtney Eckerly, one of our reporters, with me today. Thanks for joining us, Courtney.
Oh, great to be here, Dan.
And Courtney, what Courtney does is she interviews brand-side marketers and agency marketers and find out what really works in email marketing. My name is Daniel Burstein. I am the Director of Editorial Content here at MECLabs. And a way we can make this more valuable to you is using the hashtag Sherpa webinar. So we have Email Summit coming up, for example. One of the great things about Email Summit is, there's a lot of knowledge on the stage, the people we have presenting, the marketers present their case studies. There's so much knowledge in the audience, and it's so great at Email Summit, seeing different marketers meet each other, answer each other's questions, and really set up networking relations that can work for the rest of their career. So with hashtag Sherpa webinar, not only can you ask us your questions so we can help make this more valuable for you, and we're going to answer as many questions as we can possibly fit into this hour. We've already got some questions that we got when you registered that we've put into this presentation to answer as well. But again, not only can you ask those questions on hashtag Sherpa webinar, but you can also talk to each other. You can, we've got everything from entry-level marketers to experienced marketers on here. Share what works for you, ask your questions, answer each other's questions, tell us what's really working. Another way you can interact with us is by using this great ReadyTalk platform. So not only are Courtney and I here today, but if you have any technical issues with the webinar, we have Brianna and Alan in Denver. They're going to answer your questions for ReadyTalk. And if you have any other questions, we've got John and Will here in our Jacksonville Beach headquarters with us. They'll answer your questions through the ReadyTalk chat and on hashtag Sherpa webinar as well. So we look forward to hearing your feedback and hearing your questions. So let me start with the first question we got from Jeffrey. This was before the webinar. Jeffrey said, to what extent have these tips and techniques been tested and their effectiveness documented, either in the form of case studies or metrics-infused testimonials? Well, Jeffrey, I'm glad you asked that. I don't normally like to spend too much time talking about ourselves, but let me just give you a little bit of background about MECLabs and the information we put out. So yes, today we are going to have a Marketing Sherpa case study in here. And yes, we're also going to have some data from our benchmark surveys. This is how we learn more about what works in marketing. We have our case studies. We have reporters like Courtney. We're on the phone every day with brand-side marketers telling us about their campaigns. We require results. We require some metrics showing that they actually do work or that they don't and finding out what they learned. We also, like I said, we're going to share some of the research from our benchmark surveys. We actually have a benchmark survey open live right now. It's going to be for our next email marketing book. You can take that at marketingsherpa.com/survey. And then the other thing we do is we get with research partners. We get with actual marketers. Our company comes alongside them, does research about what really works for them, and we learn from that too through A/B testing and split testing and the like. And we put all that together, then we create content like this webinar and like our events and our books and all those other topics. So that's a little bit about some of the background about what you're about to hear. So here's what we're going to be talking about today, right? Class is in session. We're going to be talking about producing relevant content. It is definitely a major challenge. We hear from marketers every day about this challenge, and so we're excited to talk about it. And Courtney, why don't you give us a quick breakdown of what we're going to be talking about?
Well, email content is really an invaluable outlet for speaking to your consumers' needs. According to the 2012 Marketing Sherpa Email Benchmark Report, 69% of marketers reported that delivering highly relevant content was a top objective for this year. So in this hour, we're going to be discussing three key topics: creating contagious content, segmenting for success, and a shipping schedule that you and your subscribers can really depend on.
Yeah, so why are we talking about content? Let's take a look, like I said, at some of our research. This right here is from the 2012 Email Marketing Benchmark Report. I'm going to tweet through the hashtag Sherpa webinar a free excerpt of that benchmark report to give you an idea of some of the data we found. But if you look at this data, content it's pretty important. So 72% of B2B firms are delivering highly relevant content. They say that's a top priority to them. We need to deliver highly relevant content. But if you look at the consumer channel, B2C, or B2B2C, that's marketers that are going out both to consumer marketers, to consumers, and to other businesses, it's all in the high 60s there. Content is very important, and yet marketers are telling us only 28% of organizations are sending relevant email communications. And, as I said, the reason is it's very difficult. So First, we want to get a sense of, John, if you could launch this poll of which relevancy improvement tactics have been working for you. What works best for you? We have triggered emails, segmentation, targeted content. Which of these topics work best for you? You can vote simply by clicking there on the screen. While you're doing this, and I'm going to mention this more than once in this call because we're so excited to have this survey live, another way you can tell us about what's really working is going to MarketingSherpa.com/survey. You can take the survey for our upcoming 2013 email marketing benchmark report. Some of the data we're sharing with you is from our 2012 email marketing benchmark report. Still very relevant, still very valuable. We're doing our latest research right now, and if you do fill out that survey, you'll get a free special report for your time, and we would appreciate that. Don, why don't you close that survey, and let's take a look at what people are telling us. It looks like targeted content is very effective. I mean, that makes sense, targeted content, right, because essentially that's what good content is, targeted. It's to my needs. Segmentation is also high, not quite as high. Makes sense too. Segmentation is a little difficult, more difficult. Triggered emails, I'm a little surprised by that. Triggered emails is quite low there. Because one thing we found, like I said, through our 2012 email marketing benchmark survey, so the poll we just did isn't what we would consider statistically valid. There's not enough people answered and not enough people on the phone. But when our scientists looked at 2,735 marketers who answered a similar question, they found that triggered emails, very effective tactic, right up there. Again, that makes a lot of sense when you think of what relevant content is, which we're going to get into a second. If it's based on a trigger, if it's based on an action I do, you're sending me some information. Segmentation based on behavior or sales cycle, or we're going to talk about other ways you can segment today, and that's also a very effective tactic from our last email benchmark report. So as we're diving into this, let's talk about one of the most important things when it comes to content. It's relevancy, right? It's sending the right message to the right person at the right time. And to break that down, what makes something relevant? If we're going to stop and think for a second, you need the content, right? You need the content that's valuable to me, valuable to my needs, that is going to resonate with me in some way. And me, that's an important part, right? It's got to be relevant to me. So for example, if you send an email to me, it might have the best content in the world about Notre Dame. Don't really care. But I know my friend Courtney here is super excited about Notre Dame, and so that's where that segmentation comes in. If you sent me an email about the University of Florida and how they're about to trounce Louisville in the upcoming Sugar Bowl, I'd be very excited. And if you sent content to Courtney about Notre Dame and Alabama, and we'll see how that works out, I think Courtney would be very excited too. Again, could be valuable content, just need to segment and understand what works for people. And then there's timing. So if you send those same emails out on January 15th, after the bowls have completed about your prediction for the bowls, again, not very valuable content. So that's, a high-level look at relevancy and what we're going to talk to you about today. But anytime you're crafting your email messages and you're crafting your overall content plan, think about those three factors. Think about the value of the content you're creating, who you're sending it to, and when you're going to send it. And to do that, actually, we have a question right here from Tim. If you only send out promotional emails historically and cannot risk the impact of revenue, how do you start incorporating content without upsetting the apple cart or adding new email campaigns? And I like how Tim put content in quotation marks, as if content is something different than a promotional email. And there's ways we think about it. When we talk about content marketing or inbound marketing, it's more about serving the audience. Promotional marketing is more about selling something. But one way you can do this, and actually we have John from our marketing department in the room. Normally he takes a vow of silence during these webinars, but I'll allow him to pipe up if he'd like to pitch in. So basically, they're only sending promo emails. They want to start adding content to the mix. And I've noticed one thing our own marketing team has done is start putting more content into what we consider promotional emails. So MarketingSherpa at MechLabs, we basically send two different types of emails as well. Emails that we look at as content, like, for example, our email marketing newsletter where Courtney's case studies appear, and then emails that are promotional, for example, selling one of our books or selling an event. And I think it was for the Inbound Handbook, you guys had put a blog post that another reporter, David Kirkpatrick, had wrote about content marketing and the importance of not making mistakes in content marketing. And then you use that as a reason to talk about the Inbound Handbook.
Yeah, that's right, Dan. The actual nature of your question, though, what are we asking?
So the nature of the question was, this is why totally took John by surprise. But the nature of the question is Tim was asking, he's normally sending promo emails, how can he add content in? I think one way he can add content in, to begin with, is in his promotional emails, actually have some valuable content too. Sure, the promotional emails.
Yeah. Value is key. The promotion is, of course, an added incentive, and it's ultimately the end game. But the value is what gets you there.
Yeah, excellent point, John. And sorry for putting you on the spot, but I love the look on your face. But so if you are only sending promotional emails, want to move into content, start adding more content to those promotional emails. Promotional emails usually have some sort of incentive. There's free shipping, or you get some money off or something like that, and that's fine. But also add some content, because as we all know, the conversion rate is only going to be what it is. It's very likely less people are going to convert than actually purchase your product or service. So for those people who don't buy, just another great touch point with your brand. You're actually helping them with your content, and then they're more likely to buy later. And then if you're finding that that's valuable, Tim, if you're finding that that approach is working for you, well, feel free to maybe start an actual content newsletter and to have an actual separate list set up that you only send content to. So, all right, so of course, the challenge is, where do you get this content, right? I mean, that's a big challenge that we're going to dive in today. It's a big reason we're having this webinar. So first, before we get into any new content you might create or repurpose or any of those great buzzwords, we really suggest you conduct a content audit, right? So, I mean, likely there's many different ways that you're already creating content that you don't realize. As you look at this chart, you can see, obviously, there's content going on your website. There's content that's going out in print, blogs, publicity, you're doing interviews. There's so many different things. Look at everything you're doing and see where you can find content. And a lot of companies, when I talk to them about this, they'd be surprised at the content they actually have. So, for example, if you just did one thing and were copied on a lot of the Outlook emails internally in your company, whether it's between engineering and product development, whether it's that sales sells, whether it's that customer service ends, you'd be surprised about how much valuable content is likely there. Any question that you're answering for your audience could turn into possible email send. Another great thing about email and content, as you can see here, we talk about blogs, website, and all these different things, is it's just such a great way to repurpose content you've already produced, because you're not going to take any SEO hit. There's no duplicate content when you're sending it through your email. So that's another great thing to think about. But we have a question here from Grant. How do you decide on the right mix between timely and evergreen content? How is each promoted? So that's a great question. We're talking about where you can find the content, but then you've got to decide who and when you're going to send it. And Grant, I would take a look at this right here, this little worksheet we have for you. This worksheet is from our email marketing handbook. I'll tweet free excerpt out to that as well through #SherpaWebinar. And also, I think John is going to send out an email to everyone, and this presentation will be available on SlideShare for you after it's over, so you can actually have this to use. But basically, when you're looking at your content, there's the evergreen content that you can always use. There's timely content that ties into something, for example, the Notre Dame game we were talking about. What you really want to look at is 3 different factors, right? There's the buying stage. So the funnel is going to be different for each company, but there's likely some sort of buying stage you go for. In this sense, we go from prospect, nurture, activate, retain, refer. It's going to be different if you're a B2C company, if you're a B2B company, but you understand the buying stages for your company. Think of those different buying stages. Think of the different yeses, essentially, that your customer has to say before they get to the final sale. And then what customer questions or needs do they have at each level, right? So someone who's very early in your cycle, who you're trying to get as a prospect or has recently become just added to your list, has probably very different questions than someone who might be ready to buy a pretty complex product. And then you want to add in what content you have that will answer those concerns. So some of that content might very well be evergreen content, and some of that content is going to change with time. So for example, with marketing, there's some things about marketing strategy that likely aren't going to change that you can send to your prospects over time. But if you were engaged in Facebook marketing and you're talking about marketing the old way that Facebook used to, before it had the timeline, the tabs, I don't remember what that's called, that's not going to be very relevant anymore. So what you really want to see is what different stages in the buying cycle are your customers at, and what questions and needs do they have, and how can you answer them. And that really all is part of your content audit. But then in a sense, even once you audit that content, you either have to repurpose it or you have to create new content. And the scary question arises, Courtney, who is going to create it?
Yes, creating content is a big worry for marketers, and for those of you who are wondering, yes, that is a picture of Dan. But who's going to create this content? The resources to publish routine content just don't seem to be there sometimes. Your solution might come from outsourcing writers, hiring new employees, or allotting a few hours a week to content generation for existing workers. It just really depends on your company's priorities and resources. It's definitely a daunting task, and there are ways to make content really stretch, which we'll cover a bit later with repurposing. But what you must absolutely focus on first is developing a rich story that will convey personality, value proposition, and be compelling to read. Any good journalist knows about being pitched and how absolutely annoying it can be. This is why they will produce content that will show a more personal and relevant side to your brand without pitching your customer. Someone inside your organization can tell your story best and present that human side while also educating and informing. This kind of content doesn't always have to come from writers if hiring a specific brand journalist isn't in the economic cards for you. For a smaller organization, look inside your own staff. We had a question from Karen. Because we're a medical device company, we don't send any promotional email for federal compliance reasons, but we send newsletters. We're sensitive to doctors' time. We don't want to bombard them with email. It's important to us to educate versus sell. Can you talk to newsletters? Well, I guarantee that in your staff there's a wealth of qualified subject matter experts who can bring a unique perspective to content, maybe by writing about their experiences with customers or issues they see customers having, because no one knows your product or service like you do. If you have a knowledgeable employee who maybe isn't comfortable writing, have them work with somebody who is. But whether it's a brand journalist or another employee, content created on the inside will allow for a transparency that I think subscribers really appreciate. Dan?
Excellent. So then once you start creating this content, the next thing comes is when are you going to ship it, how are you going to ship it? And the best thing to do is start up front, build an editorial calendar like a publisher would. So we have this great question here from Erin, how to building a content calendar. Well, forgive the typo. Best ways to recycle content ideas but keeping it fresh. So again, this is a great thing when it comes to the question of evergreen content versus fresh content. So depending on every company, every industry has a certain cadence to it, has a certain cycle. So for example, if you're in taxes, right, there's that certain cycle when the fiscal year closes, and there's a certain cycle when tax returns are due and all these other things. So likely there are many things that might be evergreen in there, like when it comes to gathering all your receipts for taxes, right? So you can slot that in and say, on December 20th or something, you're going to send out and say, hey, remember for any of those last-minute purchases that you make or any of those last-minute donations you give to nonprofits that you want to write off of your taxes, make sure you save those receipts. So that's something that's probably evergreen. You could send very similar content every year about saving those receipts. But then when it comes to, let's say, the January 15th email you're going to send, that might be more of something that has to be very timely about what's the latest tax law and how's it going to affect you and how's it going to affect what you should do in the year 2013, for example. So anyway, getting back to the content calendar, you also want to make sure it's in line with your marketing initiatives, right? So there's that overall cadence, that ebb and flow that your industry goes through in general, but then there's also, whatever product launches that you're going to have coming up. If you're, Apple, for example, maybe when you're going to launch the new iPhone, when you're going to have discounts on the old iPhone, when you're going to launch your next technology. So make sure you have content that's going to map to those different product launches, to the different key revenue generators that you're going to have. If you're a B2B company, it might be in the beginning of the quarter where there's less business closing. It might be about things that the company has to do to get everything in line to finally sign that contract. And at the end of the quarter, it's about, hey, how to spend that budget you have left. So those are some important milestones in there. Don't forget the approval process. You're going to have an approval process internally. It's going to vary by how big, how small your company is. If you're an agency working for a marketer, that becomes very important as well. We're going to talk about newsjacking a little later, and we're going to see why the approval process is so important, because you can inadvertently offend your customers. But you have to understand who needs to say yes to what. So if you're a big enough company where you're an email department that essentially has customers internally, for example, individual product managers of different product lines, you're going to have to determine and schedule out who's going to approve what, and also when those different products are going to be featured and where they're going to be featured in promotional emails or newsletters. Not everyone is going to get to have the big hero shot every time. And then lastly, when you're building this out, I guess the best way to say this is, be a little on the conservative side for two reasons. One, things are always going to come up during the year that you're going to want to hop on in your industry. Things are going to change with your product launches. We know, how quickly things can change. It might come down to the holiday season, and you see things aren't working, and you're going to have to, try to throw a different mix together. But the other thing is, it's just, we found it's always, there's more involved than you think. When you're planning something, maybe it's just me, but everything just seems to go well in your head. Like, you don't run into any of those little landmines or any of those little kinks. But when you're actually going through it, you'd be amazed how many different landmines you can hit. And you don't want to threaten any of your deadlines. You don't want to miss any of those deadlines. You want to keep shipping, especially if the email is key drivers for different product launches and stuff like that. So be a little on the conservative side. So with that, Courtney is going to talk about, potato chips. What does potato chips have to do with email marketing?
I think it is, about craving, and it's just right after lunch, so those actually look really good to me. Well, once you've established a repeatable process for your content, you have that editorial calendar that Dan was talking about, and you have your resources in place, you can really focus on creating the content that people crave, like potato chips. Really compelling content should have a promise of answers and solutions to customer problems. Like we touched on before, sometimes selling or pitching isn't really the best way to go. Education is absolutely vital in most industries. So if you can create educational and valuable content, you can make newsletters or whatever type of email content you're sending make an impact without having to fill up inboxes with sales pitch after sales pitch. So we're going to go over 3 types of content: repurposed, user-generated, and original, that will help you create that valuable educational content. Repurposing content can be an absolute lifesaver. Content is a never-ending need. It's the succubus of the marketing world. Once you start, you have to follow through consistently. I mean, the internet just demands so much content production. It can be absolutely maddening trying to keep up. Repurposing helps marketers make content stretch, and it also serves the purpose of reaching consumers in the way that maybe suits them best. We have a question that relates to this from Chris. I have a client whose content library is completely outdated, and there's minimal or no budget for content creation. What options for content are there? So information from your website, data sheets, and publicity can all be repurposed for your email messages. Sharing highlights from analyst reports, extracting quotes from executive email with the press, or interesting product attributes can all be of value to your customers. Repurposing blog posts into your newsletters is also another great tactic. Picking ones by popularity of retweets or comments, it will not only strengthen your credibility of listening to consumers, but the more conversational style of blogs can break up newsletters that tend to be a little bit more formal. But if your content, if your budget is too small for repurposing, you might want to consider content curation. Dan?
Yeah, and content curation is a great way to get started. And what we mean by content curation is basically, I think we all do it every day. I get it via Skype or via email. When you see something that's really relevant, you send it out. So, for example, let's say you are in the marketing industry and you subscribe to the MarketingSherpa email marketing newsletter, and you recently read, Courtney, I think your latest story was about the Tennessee Department of Tourism and how they reduced their database by 47%.
Absolutely, yeah.
So, and if you happen to be, talking with clients and customers about, the importance of reducing their email database to send more effective emails, hey, that's a great way to just simply send a link to that story and, add your own little, understanding of it or why it's important, and you've got this whole great story that's making your point for you. Obviously, there are other news purveyors out there than MarketingSherpa. I won't mention any of them. But in every industry, every industry tends to have some good industry publication, or even if you're a consumer marketer, there's different news stories that relate to what you're doing. So if you don't have the time to generate your own content, you can always share content that others are doing. I would also mention and stress, be careful how you do that. You likely want to find ways to either link to that content, or if you want to use the full content, license that content, because those owners, the people that create that content, they own the copyright to it. You don't want to violate that copyright and get a lawsuit or something like that. But again, simply linking to it, contacting them to license that content, that's a great way to get started. And then, as Courtney said, if you have the resources, start building into repurposing. And then if you're repurposing, start building into creating original and fresh content.
Yeah. I don't know, Dan. I think MarketingSherpa might be the only outlet out there. But we'll check on that later.
I think they're aware of search engines, Courtney. They might find something else.
I didn't think that one through. Well, back to repurposing a little. The key with content repurposing, and I actually just spoke with Mohammed Yassin, who's the Director of Marketing at HCC Insurance Services, about this for a blog post that was based off of an interview we had for a case study, a bit of repurposing in action there, is to start off with a really robust piece of content and to work out from there. Basically, you never want to let a good piece of content be a one-off. Focus on developing really rich ideas that can provide value from a lot of different angles. This webinar, for instance, at the very least, will be uploaded onto SlideShare, made into a replayable video, emailed out, and will be written up into an article, by me most likely.
And then we will email that article out to our subscribers.
On top of which, as we move ahead, and I'll be referencing back to past articles we've written, valuable content can always be reused to some degree. User-generated content is another absolutely fantastic form that I'm a huge fan of. Your consumers' pictures, videos, and words can be used in your email marketing campaigns to speak directly to other consumers about your product or service. Consumers are increasingly looking to other consumers before buying a product. Blame Amazon, if you will, but it's the reality we live in now. So if they don't get that kind of feedback from you, they will look elsewhere. That journey could lead them to your competitors. So comments, testimonials, reviews, social media conversations can all be used to add this element into your email content. Placing this message in your email not only allows consumers to connect with other consumers, but it shows that you listen and care about what they have to say. If you're not getting enough of this type of feedback or not the kind that you want from traditional outlets, I've seen social media be very useful for this. Not only do they encourage the inclusion of visual elements, but it's more of an easy conversational tone on most social media platforms. The only disclaimer I would put here is to make sure that the user-generated content you're utilizing, that you legally have the rights to use it. Neither Dan or I have our law degree, so we can't really speak to that, but just a little note for that. Now, this is a great quote from Flint McLaughlin, especially that last sentence. Tell them what you can't do, and they'll believe you when you tell them what you can do. Focusing on negative feedback might seem like a bad idea, but using a constructive negative comment can actually be an opportunity to build a lot of trust with your consumers. It's also a great chance to define your product and show the areas where it might not be a good fit. So addressing negative concerns and comments shows a responsibility and a sense of ethics that consumers really appreciate. I mean, I know I do. So generally, the first place that evangelists turn to make their opinions known is customer service. Most often, it comes in the form of emailed complaints, but it could really be anything. A phone call, a visit to a store, a tweet, a Facebook comment, even snail mail, if that still exists. But set up a system to train those who deal with customers directly to recognize potential evangelists. It can be really useful also to have them be able to convey the terminology that evangelists are using. Using those same speech patterns or touch points can be helpful when trying to reach out and set the bait for more brand evangelists. And I say set the bait because it can be difficult to get evangelists to interact with you directly. They'll blog, post comments, use social media to share their feelings, good or bad. So it's important to figure out where those consumers are so that you can have the opportunity to interact on that platform and really benefit from that type of content. But an interesting idea I've seen a lot of companies use lately to draw in evangelists, especially if you want a certain type of content, is contests. You can use your customers' creativity to get them to submit videos, essays, anything you want really. It's with the promise of some sort of prize. Not only do you get the exposure from the contest, but you've attracted a lot of brand evangelists whose content can really be used at any time. Now, in the case study I mentioned earlier with Mohammed Yassin, and we will tweet out that link now via #SherpaWebinar, he reached out to knowledgeable consumers and embedded videos they made into infographics that were emailed out to their list. So one particular infographic was about extreme traveling and sports. and there was a video of one of their customers explaining how to properly pack a backpack, and another featured one of their customers doing tricks while off-trail skiing. So troll the internet and look for these potentially useful items that your customers have put up, and you can either use them to inform your own content, see if the customer would be willing to share it through your networks, or maybe they would even be willing to help you develop something unique. So we have a question from Karen, who said, we are a black car company who wants to keep our high-class brand intact, so frequent discounts and holiday promotions don't work for our customer base. It's not the most exciting service, but we want to start sending more emails. Any tips to research more valuable content for our customers? So obviously with limited resource, creating original content isn't always possible, but I think it's definitely the best way to provide real personal value to your consumers. Being clear and directly addressing the value of your product by answering questions or solving problems that your consumers have is what will really resonate with them. When you focus on service, you will generate a lot of new ideas for valuable content that doesn't necessarily have to be, quote-unquote, exciting to be interesting. Now,
yeah, that's a great question for the black car service. So, one way I like to look at it when you're generating content is every company in the world, as Peter Drucker said, you exist to serve a customer. And every company really is only serving customers in one of two ways. You're either easing a pain point or you're helping them meet a goal or a dream or something like that. And so what I mean by easing a pain point is, for example, let's say you sell a car and the price of gas has gone up, and I don't want to spend so much on gas. So a hybrid or an electric car, hey, that's easing my pain point. But let's also say we're right here in Jacksonville Beach now, and it's not so sunny, but it's usually sunny here. It's beautiful. We're by the beach, and so I'd love to have a convertible. And our office is out by the beach, and drive to the office every day in that convertible, and that is, help fulfilling a dream. So for the black car company, there's probably so much knowledge they have that their customers might be interested in. So, for example, one thing that comes off the bat, last time I was in New York a few months ago, I had a black car pick me up and take me to JFK, and it was the middle of the day, and we're on the highway in Queens, and we're stuck in traffic, and it took so long to get to the airport. And it just got me thinking, what is the best day or best time of day to, fly out, to get a flight out because, when is there the least traffic in New York? That'd be a great thing the black car company can answer. I mean, they probably have expertise there more than almost anyone does, and the type of customer that takes them probably really cares about time, doesn't want to waste time as much as you can, do productive things now in the back of the car on your smartphone or what have you. And so, again, that's not a promotion, that's not a discount. That is technically content, but it's something that they already know. And so looking for the ways that you can serve your customer to help ease their pain points, to help them meet that goal or dream with content. And then obviously you do that with your product as well. I mean, that's what content's all about.
Now, speaking of New York, Dan, that was great. With regards to humanizing your content, I'm sure a lot of you have probably heard the story of the New York City cop last week who bought a pair of shoes for a homeless man on a cold night. And a tourist snapped a picture on her phone and wrote a letter to the NYPD describing the event from her point of view. The NYPD then put it on Facebook, and of course within 24 hours it had gone viral and it was being picked up by virtually every news outlet. Now obviously that is a pretty amazing story, not to mention a rare PR opportunity, but let's imagine the NYPD like a company. They received a positive review from a customer and were able to display key values of their organization and employees by using that review. So by using their customers' own words, they were able to avoid sounding braggy and use the experience of one consumer to connect to others. But even if you aren't able to use these exact elements, there's always a way to humanize your content. Whatever it's about, give it a face, a family, a passion. Some sort of quest, a struggle, and a triumph that your product had a hand in. Now, that all sounds very grand, but these are simple human experiences that anyone can relate to, and they really convey the character and values of your company. We had a question from Elliot that applies to this. Does this stuff apply to product-based sales? We have a shopping cart and sell items to photographers. Do they really want relevant content from me? Dan, can you?
Well, I kind of feel bad in the way Elliot asked the question. He's like, do they really want relevant content from me? Who am I? So what I would say is if they're purchasing from you, they likely do. And again, it comes back to, the pain point you solve or the dream you make possible. So for some of those problems that they have, they need, they're going to be shooting in some dark light conditions, and they need a special filter or whatever, they're going to buy that product from you. But the information will also likely be really helpful. And by, sharing whatever information can help them be better at photography, solving their pain points, or helping them meet their goals, not only are you becoming a trusted advisor to them and becoming that source for where they want to turn to photography, whether it's either to just learn information through your content, through the content that you're emailing them, or actually buying from you, they also have a great reason to share that with their fellow photographers. And once you get into some really niche markets, like photography might be, especially if you get a niche of photography, and we'll get into niches in a moment, it's really great to be the go-to source for information and products, because then when their friend who's a photographer has a problem, hey, they can just forward along that email to them. Say, hey, check this out. This is a great thing about whatever, and then that's how you can start to build your list too. So so don't feel bad. Like, do my customers really want to hear from me? If they're buying from you, you're already solving their problems with your products. Again, all we're saying is solve their problems, help meet their goals with your email content as well. And as we said before, even if it's part of a promotional email, that promotional email is meant to sell something that's going to solve a problem, but whatever content you're including in there can also be helping solve that problem.
I totally agree, Dan. And I was actually a student photographer for the University of Notre Dame, go Irish. And I think photography especially, I've learned so much from buying equipment. When I was a student photographer, it was all there for me and provided for me, and now that I'm just kind of dabbling in it as a hobby, I know absolutely nothing about buying photography equipment, and I think that problem really exists with a lot of photographers. It's a very knowledge-rich industry, and there's a lot of things that you can share in layman's terms maybe that will definitely help consumers a lot. In fact, Elliot, maybe you should, I'll look up your website later because I'm shopping for some photography equipment for Christmas. Well, with that being said, the goal of storytelling is about creating a caring mentality. Content should never be about selling, it should be about telling. Find content that conveys the care your employees or other consumers have for the brand. Use an interview to find the hows and whys behind the passion the author of a popular ebook feels for their subject. And use that as a way to educate by revealing their top takeaways or advice. Always telling a story will result in a feeling of community that I feel is incredibly valuable. Nothing will move consumers along the purchase path faster than feeling like they know who they're buying from.
Yeah, and so what stories are you going to tell? That's always a challenge. As we talked about, user-generated content is helpful, but it's hard to get. So what you're really looking for are those treasure troves of user-generated content. And one place you can look is internally, right? There are going to be employees that you have that might have, some good stories to share, but also they might have good customer stories to share. People in sales, people in customer service, really anyone having any frontline relationship with the customer. The challenge is this customer feedback is just so spread out across your organization likely. It could come in an email to customer service. It could come in someone sales rep met at a trade show. And so it helps to have some sort of internal plan in place. If you're a bigger company, maybe it's a place on your intranet. If you're a smaller company, maybe it's just that everyone knows they can email you this story. And then give them a little reward. You have a little plan for making this happen. If a story that they shared with you appears in a newsletter, they get a Starbucks card or a gift card or something special for helping out. And then kind of goes a little virally inside your company that by sharing these stories, sharing everyone's success, there's something in it for them. And also, it's a great way to recognize customers. So, it's a great way to recognize customers too, but also your employees. So, for example, the employee of the NYPD, the police officer, it's a great way to recognize him for what he did and, keep your employee morale high. And again, the internet and social media allows us to interact directly with our customers in ways that weren't previously possible. So also if your blog, social media sites, one, just by monitoring mentions of your company name and seeing how people are talking about your company, if they're talking about it in a positive or negative way, you can always reach out to them, try to get that story, It always helps, too, when there's some sort of incentive for them, giving them a little something. If you're the camera company, maybe it's giving them an extra, lens or something like that, whatever makes economic sense for you. Or proactively asking on Facebook or Twitter or wherever it is, if there are any success stories, how customers are using your products, and you can find a treasure trove of information there. So let's get into segmentation now. So as we talked about, for example, with photography, that's a great example of a niche, but niches have become so big. Even if you're a big company, you likely have different niches of customers within your email list. For example, Toys R Us, I shop at Toys R Us because I have kids, but my parents also shop at Toys R Us because they have grandkids. And so, there's those different niches within your own email list, and by talking to them in the most relevant way possible, you're going to generate better and better results. So segmentation is very challenging, but let's delve into it a little bit in this webinar. So Courtney, why don't you talk to us about earning trust through segmentation?
Well, email is a way to serve your customer, and that's really how you should look at it. If you're constantly blasting their inboxes with information, it doesn't come off as service, it comes off as harassment. And they will either ignore you or try to get rid of you, because if you don't care about the information that you're sending, why should they?
Yeah, but again, there's a reason that more email marketers aren't segmenting, and frankly, it is challenging. So if we look at some more data from our email marketing benchmark report, it's the top challenge, integrating email data with other data systems by far. And so in just a moment, we're going to go into some ways that you can use data, some ways that you might not have thought possible, and some ways that we can all aspire to. When we talk about these practices, obviously they're best practices. Sometimes people beat themselves up that they're not doing these practices yet. Well, it's a goal to work towards. And so let's understand that goal to work towards, and if you're not doing everything, don't feel bad about it. But we're going to get to those different ways you can use data in just a moment. But first I want to point to the second biggest challenge there, which is improving email deliverability. And that's not something we're going to cover deeply in this specific webinar. We did have Richard ask us, if you only send out promotional emails historically, actually, that's the wrong question. We got another question about deliverability, and we're not able to address it in this webinar, but I just want to have a second to talk about our sponsor, ReturnPath. And I know when I have a deliverability question, or when one of the reporters has a deliverability question, one of the people I always think of is Tom Sater or ReturnPath. And ReturnPath, our sponsor, is just so knowledgeable in that very complex topic. So just wanted to let you know that they are the global leader in email intelligence. Their inbox placement solutions can help you improve your email deliverability and increase your email marketing ROI. Their solutions utilize the world's most comprehensive set of data that help businesses build healthy and trusting relationships with their customers. So if you have any deliverability questions, I recommend checking out returnpath.com, our sponsor. Give them a quick look and see how they help ISPs and other mailbox providers enhance network performance and drive customer retention. And thank you again to ReturnPath for making this webinar that we're presenting to you right now absolutely free. I also wanted to mention again, if you have deliverability challenges, like I said, our email marketing benchmark survey, we're fielding it right now. You can fill it out at marketingsherpa.com/survey. If you do fill it out, you will get a free special report, CMO Perspectives on Email Deliverability. So if you're among those 54% of marketers that say deliverability is a major challenge, ReturnPath, and this free special report you get for filling out at marketingsherpa.com/survey hopefully will be helpful to you. All right, let's talk some more about data. So, first of all, as with content, you likely have lots of data, right? Sometimes the challenge is you don't have accessibility to it, it's not in one place, and you're not leveraging it for your email programs. But, your email database is filled with data. Your CRM or your social CRM is filled with data. You have financial software that's filled with data. I love this quote from Amy Garland, what counts? If content is king, and as content producers, I definitely think content is king. Your database is queen because, again, that helps you segment and get the content to the right people. So one type of data you can look at if you have is endemic data. You want to tell us a little bit more about endemic data?
Absolutely. And we actually had a question from Michelle that I think kind of works well for this. What are the best ways to penetrate a client's mind to gather relevant content for their audience, best practices for information gathering when writing newsletters for clients? And I think endemic data is absolutely great for gathering information for clients. And I'll reference Joel Book from ExactTarget and he is speaking at MarketingSherpa's Email Summit this February. He and I chatted a few months back for a how-to, and he told me about what Scott's Miracle-Gro does with their email list. And when a subscriber signs up, they ask them for their zip code. And from there, they use that information to send them highly personalized content for that area specifically, which is so extremely useful to their customers who need to know how to best use the product in certain planting seasons for the soil in their area. Marketers really have access to an absolutely overwhelming amount of information today, which makes it even more important to know which few pieces of information you need to provide that value to your subscribers. For B2B marketers, it might be the company, title, vertical industry. For B2C marketers, it might be geographic location like Scott's does, or age, income level. Dan?
Yeah, another type is transactional data. So we're running a little short on time now as we get into some of these different types of data. So I'm going to tweet an article through #SherpaWebinar that goes more in depth into all these different types of data. Data is definitely a complex topic, so check that out if this is a topic that's interesting to you. But transactional data obviously consists of the data that you have when people opt into your brand in some way, whether that's signing up for an email newsletter or also buying a product. Financials is a great example. And so what you're looking at with what you're looking to learn from your transactional data, three things. Recency. How recently did they opt in, transact, buy from you, whatever. It's kind of a marketing, I don't think best practice is the word, but maybe marketing legend or whatever you have is that when people have recently said yes to you, they're likely to say yes again. So when they recently either opt into your email list or they recently buy from you, they're probably going to say yes again. The other thing to think about with recency is if you sell a product, for example, that has certain replenishment to it. So if you sell air conditioning filters online and you know that people tend to buy it every year, if you see it's been 10 or 11 months since someone bought from you, it's going to make sense to send them an email reminder of like, hey, you probably need new air conditioning filters. Frequency, how often do they buy from you? If they are a very frequent purchaser, that can change the types of offers you send them as opposed to someone who buys from you rarely. And monetary, how much do they spend with you? Are they one of your top purchasers or do they not purchase often? Other type of data is behavioral data. So you can measure this with, for example, how many people and who are opening your emails, who are clicking through on your emails, who are redeeming your coupons. Essentially, what actions are they taking with you? And through their actions, they're going to tell you a lot about what's important to them. For us, if you, for example, are selling different types of products and one group always opens email and clicks through about a certain type of product and another always emails and clicks through about another type, that's a great example. That's a great chance to segment and just tell them what's really relevant to them, what they're usually opening and clicking through on. Then we also wanted to talk lastly about computed data. So computed data is essentially when you're taking one or more variables and communicating it yourself. A great example is if you know their location and you know the location of your store, you can communicate how far from one of your stores they are, and then you can also change how you market to them based on that. So for example, if there's not a store in your area, if they're 500 miles away from one of your stores, you can focus on your e-commerce site. But if there is a store nearby, you can focus on them either buying online and then picking up in store, or maybe one of your in-store promotions. So those are some great ways to segment. So of course the challenge is again, these are best practices we work towards. It's very difficult to get all this information. So we wanted to share this case study of a marketer, Nitro Multisport. What they are is a bicycle seller. And we wanted to share an example of when they started this campaign we're about to discuss, they did not have a lot of good information. And that's why they launched this campaign. And so I think it's a great example. So they basically, I think, about 10 to 15 years in business, had a lot of old email addresses. They also wanted to start mobile marketing. They were going to start sending text messages, actually. And they just did not have a lot of data beyond email address. And so let me show you two campaigns they ran that were effective for them. So the first campaign was a sweepstakes. And so sweepstakes, I think as Courtney was mentioning before, this is a great way to get some more information about your customers. Again, I'll make the quick legal disclaimer. If you do run a sweepstakes, there are laws that vary by state as to what you have to legally do with a sweepstakes. So I would definitely either look those up yourself, consult a lawyer, talk to an experienced agency. They just want you to understand that. But there's two great things about the sweepstakes, especially this one they ran right here, is one, they were able to get more information, right? They were able to get people to opt in for mobile alerts. They were also able to find more information like their location, as we talked about, even their birthday, what kind of bikes they were looking for. And so this is great information they can add to their email database because that incentive of the sweepstakes encourages people to take part in the sweepstakes. The second thing, and I thought was really interesting that they did, is they basically had two different types of customers they were looking for. They have the customers that are triathletes, and they have the customers that are road cyclists. And customers that are triathletes buy different types of bikes than customers that are road cyclists. And so to help them understand which type of customers which and segment their list, they didn't just give away one prize. They gave away a choice of prizes. So the person who was signing up for the sweepstakes could take their pick between either the the triathlete type of bike or the road cyclist type of bike. And then with this data, they could later segment. And for the triathletes, just send the triathlete information and promotions. And for the road cyclists, just send that information. So then the second campaign they did, they ran a test. So they also wanted to understand, they ran another sweepstakes, and they wanted to understand what messages would resonate most with their email lists and the different people that signed up for their email list. And so what they did is they had two different promotions. They had a promotional email that had a famous triathlete on it, and then they had a promotional email, it was kind of their sexy email, where they leveraged the old marketing adage that sex sells, and they wanted to see which type of messaging would work better. And in the end, it was actually the triathlete. So anytime you hear tests like this, I don't want you to think, well then, a sexual message wouldn't work. Obviously this is for this audience, and that's the benefit of testing. They found tying into a famous triathlete or that athletic messaging would work better for them. But if they hadn't tested, they might have gone down the wrong road, gone with the sexy messaging, and underperformed. And here are the results from their campaign. They got almost 10,000 people signed up for emails with that first, and they got a little more than 10,000 with that second campaign. But the most important thing is they were able to deliver more relevant messages. They were able to get that data so they could segment their list and be able to send messages to their audience based on what type of bike they were interested in and what type of messaging most resonated with them.
All right, well, the kind of scary part about content creation is that in the end it could be worth almost nothing. If an email message is sent at the wrong time, it could be rendered totally irrelevant. So consistently delivering the right message at the right time for your subscribers and building up a reliability is essential to having a trustworthy relationship with consumers. Accomplishing this requires an internal process that is centered around a rock-solid editorial calendar that is kept by someone like Dan, who makes sure we all stay in line. Also, the ability to sort your list and segment your customers is key. Finally, you must have a predictable approval process that works with the urgency of sending the message out. So every person in the path of sending out an email must know and respect the timeline so that you can respect your customers. So we saw in the graphic earlier that triggered or automated emails are at the top tactic to improve relevant communications. Inconsistency in email breeds carelessness, and it will begin to reflect in your open and click-through rates. So 80% of companies are using triggered emails, and for those that do it, it makes up 22% of their overall email volume. Dan, would you like to?
Let's take a look at what type of triggered emails people send. So when we look at it, this again is data from the 2012 Email Marketing Benchmark Report. Welcome emails are very popular. Shopping cart abandonment emails less so. So one reason for that might be marketers are a little scared of training their audience to abandon the shopping cart and then get some great promotion after. But those can be highly effective, so you might want to look into those. So as we talked back at the beginning of this webinar, when we talked about understanding the different stages in the buying path for your customers and delivering relevant content in that sense, welcome emails or welcome series are a great way to do that. And so having an automated email message or entire automated drip campaign can be very effective. And one way I've seen this happen, for example, there was a marketer at a university, and they were selling adult education, and she found through some looking at her analysis that when people signed up for their email list, they either bought or didn't buy within 30 to 40 days. That was when they tended to make the decision. That was a really fat part of the bell curve. And so when they signed up, she had an entire campaign, entire drip campaign that went through the decision-making process that would take over those 30 to 40 days from first learning about that university to actually making that purchase. and it was all in an automated fashion, and it was very, very effective for her. And that, again, also helps with the shipping on time when you're able to set up evergreen content that you can automate in that fashion. But you also want to take advantage of what's going on in the news. Or do you not, Courtney? Which do we do?
Well, the information that you can use from external factors can make emails a lot more timely and relevant. You can try using trend jacking tactics. Trend jackings will get your emails opened and read because they're timed with big news stories that will really catch the attention of the reader to your email content. These are already part of people's water cooler chit-chat, so they want to learn more about it. And now, obviously, earlier we were talking about the importance of having that rock-solid planned content calendar, if possible, but I think you should always leave a little bit of room for chaos, if you will. It'll make its way in there anyways, no matter how hard you try, but if there's a piece of already planned content that you can spin slightly to incorporate a new event, or perhaps you can create something new without taking up too much of your resources that will capitalize on it, it can be really challenging to implement, but with a little creativity and quick thinking, I think it can be a really worthwhile effort.
Yeah, so the challenge with that, what I say maybe you don't want to do is I don't know the best way to put this, you've got to be careful. As with any interaction between us human beings, you also have to understand what's appropriate and what's not. And so here's an example from a marketer that sent this out, and the subject line was, Steve Jobs was originally obsessed with typography. Only challenge there was this was the day after Steve Jobs died. So again, this is where when you look at your editorial calendar, you want to also understand the approval process. If anything comes up, any news comes up, who's going to approve and who's going to choose what is appropriate, what is not appropriate. Clearly that is not. Here's a great example from Marketo. I'm sure you're all familiar with them. They are the marketing platform, and they sent this out when their partner Salesforce.com was airing a B2B Super Bowl ad, and they asked, it went out right after, it was mobile friendly, and they asked, had a poll, is this a good idea or is this a waste of money? And then they actually followed up on some communications with that. Great way to tie in real time what's going on. They got press for it. They actually got some press for me because I received the email as well, and then wrote MarketingSherpa blog posts about it, which you can read through #SherpaWebinar. And then just fun things like capitalizing on water cooler conversations. When Harry was going to get married, I'm not a big royal fan. You might know more about this than I do, Courtney, but when Harry was going to get married, they had a joke, don't forget the rings, Harry, and they sent out some donuts, or I don't know, maybe it was another prince. I don't know. Okay, you explain. I don't understand the royals. But
well, I do actually have an update on this that maybe some marketers could use. Kate Middleton is pregnant currently, so that could be something it's something people are talking about. I swear on all my news feeds, it's every third line is something about Kate Middleton, so there you go. That could be something great. But Dan's right, you do have to be very careful, and I would recommend, if possible, showing it to as many people possible on your staff, your family, whoever you can, just to make sure that you never know when something looks fine to you and it's going to offend someone else. So this, for example, is a great email, but I remember when Hurricane Sandy came through, many companies were heavily criticized for sending out emails basically just like this, encouraging people to shop online with the code Sandy while they were kept indoors by the storm. So just make sure that you're not appearing cavalier by capitalizing on any potentially deadly weather events. Dan said yesterday that very wisely that you have to know the difference between a storm and a disaster. So, and I really enjoy this next one from Spirit. It displays a sense of fun while also having the potential to draw the differences or tease rivals a little bit without seeming overly petty.
And, sometimes it's just finding some fun facts that tie in. Like, for example, when NASA announced their mission to Mars, the cigar company came out with a fun campaign because, going to Mars, it took, you'd be in the space capsule for a very long time. You might get stuck there. Maybe get a nice sampler of cigars to go with you. I don't know how that would work in zero gravity, but again, just having a little fun with some facts and tying into the types of things that people are talking about anyway. So with that, We have thrown a lot at you. We've thrown a lot at you after the hour. We want to give you, in these 2 minutes, really just sum it all up, the key takeaways so you can leave this webinar, help start improving your email marketing performance right now. When we end this webinar, a survey is going to come up. We really appreciate your feedback. That would help us optimize this webinar, help us. Our job is to help you do your job better, and that will help us give you more relevant info in these webinars. But really, if we can break it down into 3 questions and answers, it comes down to what are the 3 factors needed to create relevant content, right? You need to have the content there. It's the content they crave. We need to segment it so it's going to the right people, and then it's going either real-time communications after they do a certain action that would relate to whatever you're sending, or just in general wherever they are in the buying process, that timing is so important. Besides creating original content is great. Original content is the best. Original content is very difficult. It can be expensive. What are other ways you can create content? You can repurpose. You can look to your users. And then if you can't even create content, look at content curation. Look at sharing content others have created. And the 4 types of data, as I said, through #SherpaWebinar, I shared an article that goes much more deeply into this, but think about endemic data, transactional data, behavioral data, and computed data. And so it's the top of the hour. That's all we have. Thank you, Courtney. Thank you to you for listening. And again, when the survey comes up, please give us your feedback. Thank you very much.